Hello and welcome to today's community call. It's been a while since we had this, so first of all, sorry for not being able to keep the schedule the last two times, I think. But today we are going to be talking basically about what happened a little bit in the last week or so. We put out a slide framework for a roadmap. We're going to be going over that a little bit. And then the main topic will basically be Airnode v0.2, what it actually means, what we're doing with it, what's up next, and so on. I got Burak here with me, and he will be basically available for everything regarding Airnode, any questions you might have. So if you have any questions, as always, just feel free to put them into the chat. We are going to be going over them during the session. Yeah.
Yep.
So first things first, I just wanted to put up the wireframe of the roadmap that we're building out. A lot of community members asked for some type of roadmap explaining what it is we're actually working on and what
after a year, right?
Yeah, after a year. And basically that is what is here. I'm just going to be putting it up. Thanks, Ryan, for putting this together. The upper parts, you know pretty much. The DAO V1 was launched even before the token contract was live. And it got transitioned into the authoritative DAO in July of this year. So those aspects are pretty much done. Pre-alpha was launched. 0.2 was just recently announced by Burak. We have announced the alliance and also the capability of searching for API providers on our website until Chain API is not live. That's maybe also another addition, Ryan. We could put Chain API on here. And that is where we stand currently. And what is coming up next is pretty much the points on the right side that you see. Maybe Burak can say a little bit about the point Airnode 1.0.
Yeah, so I prefer to talk about the roadmap because, like, I'm one of the, I don't know, I guess I was the only one that is against having a roadmap, but then also I was against it pretty strongly. And like I even have a post about like why we cannot have a roadmap actually. And then yeah, my reasoning is this. So if you think about it, the white paper is a sort of a roadmap in that it describes like we are going to be building this, and this, and it will be used for this. And then like it is assumed that like everyone agrees on that. I mean, obviously it can be changeable, but yeah, it essentially summarizes the destination in a way. But then roadmap is about like what is going to be done in what order, in what kind of a period of time to reach that destination. And then that is entirely a governance decision in that like how much budget do you allocate to a specific team to be able to do that? And then maybe like, is that team even capable of that? Maybe you should be withholding that grant, wait for someone else to build it, and then now your roadmap is suddenly much more stretched out. So essentially, if you try to, for example, put some dates on this roadmap, then it will be pretty difficult because like it will be assuming that like the current teams are continuing working, and then they are going at the same pace, and then the proposals are, I don't know, passing as they are usually. Like it does a lot of assumptions that may not end up holding. So yeah, essentially my view is that as long as you see progress towards the completion of the white paper, which also like, yeah, I think in general, one should expect about 80% of the white paper to be implemented within 3 years. And then the 20% that is not implemented is the part that you end up finding out that actually this was a pretty bad idea. Like in pretty much all white papers, 25%, the 20% of it will be like, it's better to not build that part, and that end up being apparent over time. But then like this is pretty much the length of like if the team is not delivering the white paper in that kind of a time period, then I don't know, like it doesn't look good for the project essentially. So, but then, yeah, I guess it is not like this is not a common understanding. So might as well just lay it out. This is this is essentially the entirety of the white paper in a way, a bit more detailed, I guess. But yeah, I also want to talk about what API3 is, because like that is, I think, one of the reasons for confusion around the roadmap and what it means for Airnode to be released. So Airnode is a kind of an Oracle node that allows API providers to run first-party oracles. And then API3 is this organization that builds the APIs and that monetizes the APIs. Like the APIs are API3's product, and the APIs are essentially like it is like the relationship between apps and dApps, in that like if it is a service on a blockchain that is powered by APIs, then it can be called a DAPI generally. And then like in some contexts, we mean DAPIs, like we say that like decentralized APIs, meaning that it is powered by multiple APIs. I don't think that's necessarily the case, but rather like it is APIs on blockchains are DAPIs. And then you can see API3 as a sort of an on-chain API provider, although we don't tend to use this, I think, because it almost feels like we are like we tend to want to have the focus be on the API providers because they're actually providing the service firsthand. But if you say you are the on-chain API provider, it looks like you are actually getting the data from them and then serving them, but that's not actually the case. So it creates a bit of a confusion. But yeah, essentially API3 aims to build the APIs, and then Airnode is a building block of this. So this is why like this roadmap is split into two. Like you need the infrastructure part for the thing to work. For example, you need the DAO for us to be able to build the APIs in a decentralized way, because like whatever you build in with like centralized governance ends up being centralized because the one that is governing it is centralized. So you first need governance to be decentralized, and then you need the Airnode to enable first-party oracles. Then you can build your products out of this. And then yeah, the Airnode release is significant in this regard, in that like now this allows us to build the products. But then, is it the product? It is not. So Airnode itself is like it's just this open source software that everyone can use potentially, but it will be enabling a lot of business use cases for API3.
Yeah, and some of the use cases you can see at the bottom. Ryan will be diving deeper into them, but for instance, we need Airnode. Essentially what Burak and his team are working on to build first-party data feeds, to build the APIs, actually to generate any type of value or monetization that everybody speaks about or is waiting for, can only be built on the basis that Airnode is ready. So Burak pretty much covered that part is essentially there and can be done. It is now up to us, or like generally the DAO, to get together and build these value-add products on top of Airnode, given that providers are running the newest version and that they're made available on certain chains to do that.
Yeah. So I think one thing to we need to really emphasize is that if you think about a lot of Oracle projects, they just get announced and then they stand the data feed up. We are this Oracle project, see our data feeds here. And the matter of the fact is, setting up a data feed that automatically updates on chain is it's quite trivial. as long as you don't care about how that is done. So what they're trying to achieve at API3 is like two things. One, do it like in a decentralized and trust minimized way. So like everything around it should be decentralized, and then it should be powered by first-party oracles. And I think even more importantly, the second point is like this should be scalable. Because when we are looking at the existing Oracle solutions, the main problem is that they can serve like such a small portion of the demand, like even in the specific use case of data feeds, like price asset data feeds, which is like the most uninspiring use of oracles. Like I don't know, like I guess Uber can come up with some kind of percentage, but it is less than 50% of the demand, definitely. Because like serving, like porting your services to all these chains, and then setting up all these data feeds, and then herding all these third-party node operators is such a huge task that it's like you cannot imagine it scaling to the scale that like the entire API industry has. So like you can't even do data feeds, let alone you should be like integrating all APIs and serving all of them. So what they're trying to build here, for example, here you can see programmatic subscriptions. So normally how an Oracle solution works is you go to their business development people with your business development people, you talk about things, you sign exclusivity agreements, and then you do this like partnership confirmed tweet, whatever, and then someone does the integration manually. The thing is, this is not scalable at all. And then this is not permissionless at all. And then a DAO cannot do this way anyway. So like if you want this to happen in a scalable way, in a permissionless way, to serve all use cases in a way that like an API comes to provide their services and then a project needs it and then they use it, and then the DAO facilitates this without like anyone being like even aware of this, is the goal, because like this is the only way that we'll be able to serve all these use cases. And then like this is the reason why we're not rushing to build products, is that like we are working on scaling up the speed of integration. So we need to integrate all these APIs, and then from the contract developer side, the integration should be very scalable. Like they shouldn't need to talk to anyone, essentially. And then the entire monetization scheme should be entirely streamlined and then customizable by the API provider, so that they can say like, I want to get paid this much, and then I want to get paid in this way, etc. And then like, yeah, anything short of this is not satisfactory as a final product. But then Airnode version 0.2 allows us to build these more manual, more industry standard like products, essentially whitelisting people manually, for example, if like in a similar way that I just described.
Yeah. So essentially, if people are wondering if there is a project out there that very specifically wants let's come up with something, carbon credit data, then, and we have a provider ready, then the only thing we need for that is to let that provider deploy 0.2, approach them, possibly come up with how we pay them, get that payment from whoever is requesting it, manually whitelist them, and now you're basically running into the issue that Burak described. Now we start doing this for one project, and then we have another one that requests this, and another one that requests this, and suddenly you're building up this huge pipeline that one team is basically just gonna be overwhelmed and working down on, while we could be programmatically handling these.
Yeah, I think the permissionlessness part is extremely important, because projects are actually suffering from this. Like there are a lot of things that you have to do to get a data feed, and then like a lot of things that you have to avoid doing because you're getting that data feed from that specific Oracle service. Like people just, I think, want more like products to be like not come with strings attached, and then this would also help with that, because this is also hurting the Oracle service providers, which in the first part Oracle case would be the API providers, because like if you say that, for example, you can only work with me as an Oracle service provider, and then you're essentially hurting the people that you're working with because they want to provide their Oracle services, but then you're not allowing them to because they are not signing your exclusivity agreement or whatever. So like, yeah, essentially this is just hindering I don't know, the rate of products being built. So yeah, in general, I think it's pretty important, like not only for like number go up reasons in terms of integrations, but also for like very legit business reasons.
Yeah. Is there any other aspect here that we want to go into? Or do we wait until Ryan puts out the description of them?
Yeah, I think we should mention that this is a work in progress, and there is a thread in the forum about it. So, like, if you have any questions or recommendations, just make sure to comment on it.
Mm-hmm. Also, if you guys have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. We will be addressing them. I guess the big thing that we wanted to talk about today is what changed with version 0.2. There has been a lot of, I don't want to say confusion, but there has been a lot of talk in Discord and the forums and whatnot about it. Maybe we let Burak simply tell us what changed. What does this mean now?
Okay. I mean, I already have 2 articles out about this, and I will be looking at those while talking, but I can, I think I should be referring to them to not miss anything. So, yeah, essentially, there's one article called Beyond Pre-Alpha RRP, which is Request Response Protocol, which describes the changes that were made to the protocol contracts. So, if you think about Airnode, it's the nodes and the node and the contracts. So we are developing both at the same time because the two is supposed to integrate to each other. So, and then we had the pre-alpha out for a year now, and we got a lot of feedback, and like some good, some people being confused about things. So in general, like even if one user is asking something about like they couldn't do something, that's indicative of 10 people getting stuck and 1 person deciding to ask about it. So essentially use all the feedback to further streamline the thing, because this is supposed to be used by developers, and like it should be pretty universal. Like everyone is supposed to use this whenever they need to use an API in their dApp. So like it's pretty important to get right. So yeah, essentially we did a lot of things to make it easier to understand for the developers. So for example, one thing is for Airnode management. So a lot of the things that you can do to manage your node. So normally what I've seen with other Oracle solutions is you need to configure your node for everything, which is pretty bad UX, because like whenever you fiddle with your node, there is a chance to break it. Also, you may have multiple people. Say you're an API provider, you're a company, you have a team of 5, and then you have an Oracle node. So whenever something needs to be done, you don't want to allow like one of your developers access your Oracle node and fiddle with stuff just to essentially change a setting to whitelist someone, for example, because they could be doing essentially anything there. And then it is pretty difficult to get a handle of. So instead, what Airnode does is it does some of these configurations on chain. And what this allows is that, one, now you can, for example, authorize a specific account to only be able to change a specific setting. For example, you can only whitelist people, but you cannot unwhitelist people. But then also, you can also integrate these functions to contracts as well, which allows you to now automate or make it programmatic. Things like monetization, such as when this guy pays this amount of tokens, whitelist them. So it helps in two ways. And then, so for example, Enormous gave a proposal about building an an Airnode management UI. And then this is supposed to be about that. And then we are also building similar functionality for Chain API, or at least designing it. We'll probably prioritizing other stuff because it's already being built in somewhere else so that we don't duplicate the work. But the idea is that essentially this should be pretty easy to do. Like you plug your mnemonic in your MetaMask, you do the whitelist thing. Because the thing is, we are expecting API providers to be able to do that, which are supposed to be like not familiar with blockchains. So, for example, we shouldn't expect them to use a CLI tool and whatever. So it should be, it should work with MetaMask pretty well. And then we did some changes to the protocol to allow that.
We were talking about basically the cross-chain functionality also, but
right.
That is not in there. Sorry.
It actually kind of is. So it is actually about what I just talked about. So when you integrate the thing, so let me talk about, I guess, oracles and what they do. So if you think about it, we are a DAO on Ethereum mainnet, and then we want to serve on Polygon and whatever else, other chains, non-EVM chains, etc. But then how do we get paid on Ethereum mainnet if the oracles are on this other chain? So one solution for this is you build these token bridges, and then you bridge the API3 token to Polygon, and then it is used for payments in Polygon. And then this is like, this is pretty bad of a solution because token bridges, like when they break pretty badly. Like it results in like significant loss of funds. And then the problem is you need to use a sort of an oracle to do the bridging. And then there are no first-party oracles for blockchains because like if I want to know if someone sent tokens to the bridge contract on Ethereum mainnet, like there is no authority for that. So I have to use third-party oracles, which are not reliable in the first place. So that in general is pretty difficult to build in a trustworthy way. And then when you build it in a trustworthy way, you will be paying to use it. So essentially, whenever you have some kind of a security, that comes at a cost. So there is a high security without cost. So you're essentially paying a sort of a middleman tax there, essentially overpaying them so that they don't attack you. So like for every bridge, you will have to pay these oracles to bridge your tokens. And then let's say there's this new chain, very little usage, and then it just makes no sense to set up a token bridge, which means you will not serve that chain. So that is, that's also, again, pretty bad. But then, I mean, if you think about it, the oracles are used to do this cross-chain communication. So why don't, do the payment on Ethereum mainnet and have the oracle operating on Polygon or wherever, check if the payment is done on mainnet. So you're again using the oracle as a bridge, but it is not bridging tokens, it is bridging information. And if that oracle decides to lie, let's say there's an API provider serving on Polygon, and then they decide to lie about the bridging. What they're essentially doing is, like, you paid them on Ethereum mainnet to provide a service on Polygon, and then they're rejecting to provide that service. The thing is, they can do that already. Like, whenever you're using a single oracle, you're trusting them to provide the service that they promise to provide. So that bridge being dependent on a single oracle is not a problem at all. So it is a lot like how using first-party oracles makes a lot of sense in that you're already trusting the API provider to provide the data. You can also trust them to act as the bridge that writes it to the chain without any loss of trust. Here, it is exactly the same way. You're avoiding all that middleman tax of bridging tokens. Now, like, you can immediately start serving on any kind of chain as long as the oracle that is serving there can, like, it can also listen to Ethereum mainnet, essentially. So it becomes much more easier to start serving on other chains compared to setting up token bridges and stuff.
Yeah, just in regards to token bridging, maybe also in parts to governance. Since the API3 token is needed for governance, like you need to stake it to reach certain, basically, to reach, like we need to have a certain amount staked for the insurance pool and so on. And basically, if we would allow bridging or bridge onto every single chain, that also scatters the token into every single direction, meaning that there is a less potential of certain funds being staked, just simply because the funds are technically locked on a bridge on ETH mainnet and floating around somewhere on a side chain. So I just wanted to address that because a lot of people are always asking when Binance Smart Chain, and the answer is currently, it appears like not very soon.
For us?
Yeah.
So yeah, I would say that serving on testnets, by the way, this is also a problem. So you want to be able to serve on testnets, and then you will have to monetize that because the service that you're building your Oracle service on top of is paid. So your Oracle service also has to be paid. But then if you think about how you would monetize service on Ropsten, like, are you going to bridge your tokens to Ropsten? I guess not, because that doesn't sound like a good idea at all. So essentially, with token bridging, there's no way of monetizing service on a testnet. But then in this case, there would be. And then this implies that as soon as we are able to monetize service on testnets, we are able to monetize service on all the other chains, like Binance Smart Chain. So, and then this is a pretty immediate need, I'd say, to serve on testnets in addition to Ethereum mainnet, which means that this should happen in like short term.
Don't give out the time frame, please.
I will not, but we will be rushing to it. I mean, I can just talk about what we are building. So, like, we released 0.2, which is essentially a much better pre-alpha. But then in terms of functionality, like, we only added the monetization stuff on the chain that the Oracle is serving on. So essentially, like, as Ugur said, like, you can start using it with manual whitelisting. So in addition to pre-alpha didn't have that. Now we have that, which means, like, not being able to be used to be able to be used. But then, like, what are we building next at 0.3, 0.4, 0.5, etc.? So one thing is, we are working on the Oracle response to be much more customizable. So one thing, I think, one very significant problem with, and then this could even be considered as a part of API integrations, but essentially, in pretty much all of the existing Oracle solutions, the kind of Oracle request that you're making is implemented in a custom way by coding. Like there's essentially a developer building a project, building an application, saying that take the response that the API returned, translate it in a way that my contract will consume, and then this piece of application gets used along with the Oracle node. And then this acts in two ways. One, this is like a pretty specialized thing to do. The API provider doesn't know how to do this, and the contract developer doesn't know how to do this. That's very specific. And then this is very difficult to do properly. Like if they attempt this, they will, like whatever they build will break. It will not be good enough. And third is, if they build it for themselves, no one will be able to reuse it because like it was purpose built for their use case. It's not generalized at all. So in 0.3, 0.4, what we are working is this generalized framework where the requester can specify like how they want the API response to be processed before it being returned to them. But then this being so generalizable that like it pretty much serves all use cases, and then this doesn't require any coding from the requester side. And then some part of this is at the API provider side, because there are some cases where the API provider wants to process their responses because they, for example, want to obscure some of the data. For example, there was this API provider that returned weather data, and then they are legally not allowed to give us lightning strike data for some reason. They probably got sued for it, whatever. But then they have this whole object that they return, like weather, like temperature, precipitation, whatever, a lot of fields. There's this one lightning field, like lightning strike probability, I think. Like the user is not allowed to see this or use this, whatever. So the API provider should be able to obscure that single field. And for example, another API provider that I can think of, a pretty big one, they require to also include this sort of a license string along with their response. Like they legally have to do this because they are essentially like sourcing their data from a lot of different sources, and whenever they do, they need to be like, they are allowed to do it as long as they attribute that they're getting it from there, but then they're not allowed to not pass that on. So for example, they can integrate the endpoint in a way that is always added, but the user can just discard it. So yeah, essentially making integrations a lot more generalizable, like that will be pretty significant, because as soon as, for example, when you do a hackathon, like there's this question of, okay, so this is how I return a single field that the API returned. How do I return two fields? And then this is quite difficult to do in a generalizable way, because then another one will want to return three fields, and then another one will want to return three fields, but the second field to be, I don't know, divided by 2 or whatever. So essentially this needs to be very generalized, and we're working on that. And then, yeah, 0.5 is, or at least at the moment, it is mostly about these cross-chain authorization calls, which is the thing that I mentioned just before. Like, I'm on Binance
Phantom.
Smart Chain. Yeah. Phantom, okay. Phantom maybe makes more sense. I'm on Phantom, and then, so currently you can just, with 0.2, you can deploy Airnode on Phantom. You can whitelist manually. It starts working on Phantom. But like I said before, we want to scale this up. We want this to happen permissionlessly and like all the time without us even being aware of it. So then, whenever a Phantom Airnode for example, gets a request, to be able to decide if they should be responding to it, they go and check Ethereum mainnet, like, am I paid actually? Yes, and then response on Phantom. So, and then this is, like, this pattern is actually used a lot, even it's also used in PSP, because this is essentially required. Essentially, this is the only way of doing it, and it is like pretty amazing to me that it hasn't been done yet. But I guess first-party oracles are also not done yet, so like one can't be too surprised. But yeah, I'd consider this as a sort of a breakthrough, and this will be 0.5. And then, yeah, also like PSP is on the horizon in that we are prototyping on it. So maybe we can talk about PSP a bit, because I was told that like we don't talk about it enough, where in fact it's this game changer and then very much needed, but people just don't know it. So I mean, if you think about Oracle solutions, they are entirely designed around setting up data feeds, even like price data feeds. And then a lot of even Oracle projects are presented as like, we will provide price data feeds for DeFi projects, like they pigeonhole themselves that hard. And then they built their entire protocol around that to be only able to provide that kind of a data. So what PSP does is it tries to generalize that so that you could use it not only to build data feeds, essentially anything that you would need. So if you think about those data feeds, what they need to operate is one oracle and a keeper, or a sort of a bot that triggers an update whenever it's needed. So when modeled this way, like you can generalize them quite well and come up with a sort of a protocol that you can use to build a data feed, but then it is also like very flexible to build anything else. And the nice thing about this is, if you think about how oracles are used today for DeFi, you first set up a data feed, which is a lot of oracles, and then a bot that updates, triggers updates somehow. And then there are these other group of keepers that are triggering liquidations based on what the data feed does. So there are two layers of keepers where in fact they can be merged into one. So essentially an oracle plus keeper can, instead of maintaining a data feed always live on chain, it can instead stay silent for the whole duration and just trigger the liquidation whenever needed. And then this means essentially like this suddenly allows you to build like DeFi protocols that serve 1,000 price assets, because 1,000 assets, because you don't have to maintain 1,000 data prices as long as like they are not being actively traded on at that moment. And as soon as they start being traded with, then you can like every time there's a liquidation, you write that to the chain, and then that can be reused by someone else to trigger a liquidation. So like it becomes increasingly more efficient. But then like if you're this eccentric guy that wants to trade on like, I don't know, wood price, maybe that's not very eccentric, but like if you're even the only one person that wants to do that, you can do that. And then I think this is one of the main problems that prevent layer 2s to gain traction, is that like you need this huge data feed always chugging to be able to build a DeFi solution on top of that. But then more lightweight solutions like this should allow layer 2s to proliferate, and then this means like lower gas prices, a lot more usage.
We also
And
have
then,
a question in the chat. Just once you're finished your point, I just realized.
Moon River Mundi. When is that one? Okay.
Yeah, I think we covered that in the beginning, right? Or like not, maybe it is missed. Like essentially, Burak said this pretty much in the beginning. His team is responsible for building out Airnode and the main infrastructure behind everything. And not once that is done, because that is pretty much already fleshed out, we're currently looking to make a lot of this available on various different chains. And as long as the chain is EVM compatible, it doesn't really involve any complexity. It's just that the request response, like the contract, needs to be deployed on the specific chain. And once that is done, the specific Airnode that you would want to listen to needs to be made aware that there's a contract on that specific chain it should listen to. As with data feeds, maybe I'll just put up the thing here again. One thing to consider is when I say like single Airnodes, it still runs under the assumption of request response. So basically, if you want Bitcoin price from FTX, you make a call and say, give me Bitcoin USD. Then you make another call to retrieve the answer. One of the value add products we see here is first-party data feeds. So technically, we could, in combination with keepers that Burak was talking about, set an oracle in combination with a keeper to watch the Bitcoin USD price on FTX and update upon a certain condition without you be needing to, so to speak, make that first initial request. So whenever you actually request now, you always get the up-to-date price. And then there's data feeds in the sense that you described that describe the allocation of multiple data points into one single response. And that is the APIs. That is also something that is being currently built. So maybe, do you want to say anything, Burak, since you...
Yeah, I mean, previously, to clarify, PSP doesn't require external keepers in that the Airnode acts as its own keeper, is the idea. And then the thing that you're talking about is using RRP, the existing protocol, to build data feeds. So that requires an external keeper.
Exactly.
So you already meant that.
Yeah, I already meant that. Like, there's a differentiation between those two things. Yeah.
Yeah, so I generally like PSP, or for example, I would much rather build data feeds out of PSP because like it is that much of a breeze. Because I mean, if you think about it, it's built to be extremely robust. This is essentially one of the reasons why it is presented as this. It makes first-party oracles feasible in that, like, it is as robust of an oracle that it doesn't require maintenance like the other oracle nodes would. And then, if you think about it, if your service also requires a keeper to operate, then you would probably also want that very robust node to also act as the keeper. So you're sure that that is also covered. That will also not fail. So, but then, yeah, go ahead.
I see it more as a in-between solution. PSP, for those of you who don't know, as the pub sub protocol. So basically, the function that I just described, that the Airnode itself checks on a certain condition. For instance, price moves up 1%, so that it automatically knows and has that price ready that you're needing, so that when you make a request, you actually only make one request to it. That is not the case with the current request response protocol. So basically, you would need to make a call, then it fetches the answer, and then you make another call to get the answer that it received. But that part can technically, with external keepers, like Burak mentioned, also be built so that it appears pub sub like key, so that it's only actually one call that you make, and it still appears or functions like a data feed, even with request response protocol.
Yeah, what's funny is, like, this is normally how oracles are built. like whenever we have like a better solution in mind, it feels like the current state of art is not good enough. And then like this is what Ugur is describing, is like this is what everyone does. And then I'm just saying PSP is much better in that. Like the other thing is the industry standard, and then this is this huge improvement on top of it. But yeah, about Moonbeam, I think pre-alpha works on Moonbeam. Like there was an integration. It works fine. I don't know about Moonriver, but I assume it would. So yeah, essentially, like as I said before, serving those chains is as much of an issue as serving an Ethereum testnet. Like if it is properly EVM compatible, then it should just work. You just need like a user there, and then an API provider that is willing to serve that user, and then like that's your use case. And then it depends on how much of these you can do manually at this stage. In the future, it will be like if you're on Moonbeam, you're a developer on Moonbeam, you're able to use API3 services without even talking to API3. So that's the main goal.
But again, I'm not sure if this question comes from basically the interest in data on Moonbeam or Moonriver. We, like I mentioned before, this is technically all possible in a manual way. So if there is any interest, you can go to our website and click on the Web3 API search. And we actually have all of our providers listed there. And if there is a specific one, you can fill out a form and we will receive that a request from you. And from that point onward, it is basically up to us to grant you access. We have to come to some sort of agreement. The provider has to be willing to serve that chain. But like we laid out the entire call here, it is possible manually. A lot of the things are being waited on for from a UX perspective.
Yeah, it's mostly about, so there is this there is always something that you require from the user to do, like you can't do the entire work for them because there's always this specific thing. So you try to do as much of it. So I'd say that at the moment we did 80% of the entire Oracle service thing. So like the user would need to do the 20%. What is that? Go to the API listing and then like come up with what APIs you would need, what endpoints you would need, and then talk to us. And then once we whitelist you, like find out how to make the request and then make the request, and then it works. But then like what we want to build on top of that is like a 10% addition that takes out some of these steps, and then a 5% addition that takes some of these steps. And then at some point, it will be 99% of the work is done. So what you need to do is you just send your tokens and you have access, and then it is pretty much a turnkey solution. Like you don't even have to be a developer to use it. Like this is what we're trying to aim. And then like there will not be this, I think, quantum leap towards that. So right now, majority of the work is done, but there's still some legwork to do. And then it will be increasingly smaller and smaller, that extra work that needs to be done.
Yeah. I guess it is maybe important here also to reiterate that a lot of the Oracle solutions work exactly in that fashion. I think we mentioned this prior. So basically you as a project reach out, you need to talk to somebody, you need to get manual whitelisting. And it is something we can do. It is most likely something we will do under certain conditions in the coming weeks. But basically for something to be in any way scalable for us, there are certain measures we need to take in order to just make it scalable.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, if you think about like the main goal is to serve all APIs across all chains to all use cases. And then that is, I think, our primary goal when making a lot of decisions about what to do next. So like a bit of a long-term thinking. But then, like even in this case, like we already have a lot to be used at the moment. Like if I wasn't working on API3, I would be working on something that uses API3 definitely. Because this is essentially, like this is the technology that I wish we had 2 years before now. And then this is essentially why we are building it, is like we realize that like no one will build this, and then to be able to enable the things that we want to enable, like we will have to be the ones to build this. And then this is what that infrastructure is.
We have another question.
So microtransactions are bad in that like it adds this gas price overhead, gas cost overhead. So for example, paying for each request is pretty bad, like sending a bit of tokens each time, because like even if you're doing it inside a transaction, so for example, if there's a transfer and call, you're paying extra to send that small amount of tokens. So what we want to do, and this is one of the reasons why we call the service the API, like on-chain APIs, is that we are trying to replicate the web API UX on the blockchain. And how the web API works is you subscribe to the API, you pay a monthly fee, and then while you're subscribed, you have access. And then the call limits are, in most cases, pretty relaxed, and it is quite easy to satisfy the kinds of call needs that a blockchain project would want to do anyway, because of the block sizes and such. So what we are aiming to enable in terms of monetizations primarily is the requester subscribes to the first party oracle, meaning that some kind of payment ensures that you have access to that Airnode. But then the major thing that we detected about existing Oracle solutions was that the Oracle node or the Oracle node operator paying for the gas cost of fulfillments, because one, like ETH price fluctuates a lot, or whatever native currency that you're using. And two, like fulfillment gas cost changes. So like whatever your requester wants you to do with the answer changes how much that costs. And then the number of calls they make mean like 20 calls is twice as expensive as 10 calls. So now you have to count their calls, which adds additional an additional overhead. And also API providers cannot trade cryptocurrencies in the first place. So this makes the entire idea of the existing Oracle solutions enabling first-party oracles like a non-possibility. And then what the Airnode protocol does is it is entirely designed around the requester paying for their own gas costs, like the gas costs of their fulfillment transaction. So when you make a request to an oracle, you're also funding the wallet that is supposed to fulfill your transaction. And then, for example, if you're planning to make 100 requests over the next month, you would probably send a lot of ETH to that wallet so that you don't have to keep sending the ETH, because each time you send ETH, you will be paying for the gas cost. So even there, you can avoid the microtransaction and then the associated gas cost overhead. So yeah, in short, there are two payments that a requester needs to make. One, to subscribe to the API, and two, for the gas costs. And then they don't need to do it per request. They can do it in batch. But they can also do it per request.
I have another one, and I think it is also almost time. We're almost up an hour. Didn't even realize.
This PSP could be much more interesting for that one.
Yeah, it's the only one left.
Can we take that? Like,
yeah, we have enough time. I mean, it's up to you.
Okay, I mean, okay then. Just read this then. because it's absolutely right. Like this is
PSP could be much more
like,
interesting for.
I mean, we are not building Airnode for bridging chains, but Airnode is perfect for bridging chains, especially like when you have PSP up. Like you can build pretty nice bridges as long as you have like reliable people to operate these Airnodes. You will be able to like run this kinds of cross-chain things, not only for authorizing API access, but also this stuff. So like it would be very nice for people to also use Airnode for this, which would mean like additional eyes on Airnode in terms of like usage and development and finding bugs, etc. It doesn't necessarily cater to API3 business use cases in that like we are API oriented. This doesn't really have much to do with APIs, but we would love to like enable more like use cases beyond that.
Yeah, I think that's it for this time. As always, like the topic this time was chosen by the community. I will be putting out a similar thing again within the coming week. If you have any feedback, if you want us to dive into a specific field that interests you, as always, leave us comments, write us on Discord or Telegram. I will do my best to come up with a setting where we can dive into a specific aspect that you want explained. And we have time for that next session. So in 2 weeks, we can do a community chosen setting again. And in the community call in 4 weeks, we actually have a guest appearance again. So we won't be able to do anything there in regards to community wishes. Perfect. Thanks, Burak, for your time, as always. And thanks for everybody listening in. Hope this was nice for all of you. And yeah, thanks for following.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye. 1 sec.